Good morning, Chairman. We are now live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this first formal meeting of the Community Safety Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Alan Woodruff, and I'm the chairman of this committee. To my right is my vice chairman, Councillor Neil Carey, and on my left is our Democratic Services Officer, Andrew Warnes. Also present in the chamber is our Scrutiny Officer, Tracy Johnson. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors, leave the building through reception into the front car park and wait for further instructions. This meeting is being streamed live via the County Council's website, and all of your comments will remain accessible online after the meeting and can be reported to the media. With this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public and press watching our meeting today. Can I remind everyone to ensure mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting, and the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. If you wish to speak, can you please raise your hand and we will make a note. When invited to speak, you should press the button on your microphone unit to make it live. Please speak directly into the microphone so you can be heard. When you have finished, please turn off your microphone. We will now move on to the formal agenda. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Andrew, do we have any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Trevor Bridgewood, with Councillor David East replacing him. We also have apologies from Councillor Karen Lee, with Councillor Kev Clark replacing her. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. On to item 2 is the declaration of interests. Members of this committee are reminded that they only need to declare any relevant interests which have not been declared on their declaration of pecuniary interests form. If you become aware of an interest at any point during the meeting, you can declare it then. Any interests declared will be recorded within the minutes. Do any members wish to declare any interest? No, that's okay, thank you. Item 3 is relating to the minutes of the previous meeting of the Public Protection and Communities Scrutiny Committee held back in February of 2025. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting of the Public Protection and Communities Scrutiny Committee held on the 25th of February 2025 as a correct record. The minutes can be found on pages 5 to 16 of the agenda pack. Members are reminded that we are considering minutes of the previous committee that was decommissioned on the 23rd of May 2025, and in relation to them being a correct record, rather than in relation to whether members were present for that meeting. So with this in mind, do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Brockway. And a seconder? Councillor Whittaker, thank you. We will now vote. All those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Those minutes are recorded as a correct record. Item 4 is announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. As we convene for the first meeting of the newly established Community Safety Scrutiny Committee, I extend a warm welcome to all members, both returning and new. This committee succeeds the former Public Protection and Communities Scrutiny Committee. Before we move on to today's business, I would like to briefly mention the induction programme for newly elected members and remind the committee of the upcoming session on strategic questioning skills, training for scrutineers. This will be held on Monday the 30th of June at 10 a.m. via Microsoft Teams and will be provided by an external trainer. If you are able to attend, please contact Democratic Services and they will be able to send you an invite to the session. Moving on, do we have any Executive Councillor announcements? Councillor McGonigal, you're the Executive for Community Safety. No, nothing from you. And Councillor Rob Gibson, I know, is away on other business, but we don't have a stand-in for... No. Okay, moving on. Finally, are there any announcements from the senior officers? No, all happy. So we'll move on to the main item of business. For item 5, we will first sit as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee under Section 19 of the Crime and Justice Act 2006. Moving on to item 5 in the agenda pack, the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership Strategy for 2025 to 2028. This report is on pages 17 to 42 of the agenda pack and sets out the strategy for the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership for the next 3 years, the County Council's statutory duties under the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, and the process undertaken to ensure that the strategy supports the needs of Lincolnshire and further develops the response to crime, disorder and antisocial behaviour. The actions required by the committee are to review and comment on the contents of the report and to endorse the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership Strategy for 2025 to 2028 to reduce crime, disorder and antisocial behaviour in the county of Lincolnshire. The report will be presented by Martin Parker, the Assistant Director for Public Protection, and Jade Thirlsby, Domestic Abuse Business Manager. Over to you, Martin and Jade.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to do a very quick introduction. So the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership is an informal agreement between the district councils, the Lincolnshire County Council, a number of other statutory partners such as fire, police, the PCC, that collectively come together to operate as a community safety partnership, which is part of their duty underneath the Act to do that. And as part of that, we have to do a strategy every 3 years. So this is not just to be clear, this is not a Lincolnshire County Council crime and disorder strategy that will come to a later meeting. This is a Safer Lincolnshire Partnership collaborated group of partners strategy in terms of how we're going to deal with and respond to crime and disorder. And I'll introduce Jade Thirlsby, who will then take us through the report.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, so as Martin said, this is a strategy that serves the whole of the county, and it's in response to our under the Crime and Disorder Act and our statutory duties within that. So as part of that, we have to produce a strategy every 3 years and have a plan that sets out how we're going to support reduction of reoffending, crime and disorder, as well as combating substance misuse, addressing antisocial behaviour and understanding serious violence for Lincolnshire. We also, as part of that statutory duty, need to consult with the public on community safety priorities, and we need to do a needs assessment in terms of, to inform our strategy every 3 years. Within the report, you can see we've outlined some of the main statutory duties that sit within there, one being the Crime and Disorder Act, the other being around the serious violence duty that was introduced in 2022 and sits in a partnership effect within the SLP and is managed through there. Also the Counter-Terrorism Security Act for 2015 and how that duty sits under the SLP for Lincolnshire. And also you'll see within the strategy itself, we talk about the Victim and Prisoners Act as well, which is a new act that we're still waiting for final guidance on as to exactly what that's going to mean for us as a county council and a partnership as well. In terms of the strategy development, there was a extensive strategic needs assessment undertaken in order to identify the areas that we needed to look at for Lincolnshire in terms of this area of work. And that also included looking at analysis and demand data. It included looking and speaking to stakeholders and engaging with partners within the community, as well as doing questionnaires and surveys to inform this piece of work on what we needed to look at. The strategy itself is attached as Appendix A and gives you an overview of kind of the context in relation to crime, disorder and antisocial behaviour for Lincolnshire. It sets out our vision as a partnership, our principles and our approach that the SLP will take over the next 3 years. What you'll see in the strategy is that we've moved to, for 2025-28, we've moved to a project-based approach to meet our statutory duties. And this feels that we can be far more focused, targeted, and deal with the issues that we're seeing within our community in a more reactive as well as proactive way. The projects that will be undertaken within the SLP will be underpinned by routine data scanning and analytical insight, and they will be monitored very carefully by the strategic board of the SLP. Projects that fall under the governance of the SLP will take three kind of approaches. One will be, there will be some that will be offered in terms of a universal offer for our whole of our county. Other projects will be very specific, but they'll be county-wide, but focusing on a key issue or concern that's been raised through data or through stakeholder engagement. And then we'll have some very much locality-based, place-based approaches, working in communities where we clearly need to bring together our resources and work very closely together as partners to solve some issues. I think in terms of the conclusion of that, the strategy was kind of did take place in terms of a wide-ranging needs assessment. It's developed through extensive process of engagement. It has, all partners have signed the, been consulted on and signed the strategy off and had their kind of say in terms of any changes to that. And I think other than that, there is quite a lot of extensive information about Lincolnshire within the report as well, our profile, and clearly sets out our kind of strategic intent. What will follow after this is some very detailed terms of reference for project groups. It will also, will follow from this will be the projects and exactly what the scopes of those look like and what we're intending to deliver within certain areas. So the detail will sit underneath this strategy. This is a high-level strategic document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jade. And Martin, thank you. I'd now like to invite members of the committee to speak on the report. Councillor Carey, any speakers? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. Reading down today's paper, I was pleased to see this partnership working. I would request that this same partnership actually looks at a resulting of an ongoing issue. It's antisocial behaviour in Lincoln. It's parking on pathways. It might seem trivial, but it is an antisocial behaviour. When you contact the police, they tell you it's the Lincolnshire Highways Department who deals with it. When you contact Lincolnshire Highways, they tell you it's the police who deal with it. So obviously, you know, the partnership ain't quite working here, and residents bluntly are getting fed up with ringing up and just getting the same merry-go-round all the time with it. Also, has there been any work carried out with reporting crime of the non-reporting crime, where the same thing is happening, that people's ringing up the police with a complaint, no police come, tell next door neighbours, all that happens is next time there's a crime, no one reports it. I had a incident when I had a journalist tell me the crime in my area was actually going down, and I said it's not going down, people just aren't reporting it. So I just thought I'd bring those two issues up today. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll feed both those items back to policing through the partnership.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, just following on from Councillor Clark's point, actually, just with regards to, so the report says about responsible authorities in the local area to work together to discharge their statutory duties. And it says that the Police and Crime Commissioner is not a statutory member. Shouldn't there be a sort of joint group of, you know, to sort local crime out rather than having two different strategies from one from Police Crime Commissioner and one from us? Shouldn't it be one contingent partnership with one complete strategy? Thank you.
Yeah, so the SLP one is the joint strategy, and it has to be minded to the PCC's crime strategy, and the PCC's crime strategy has to be minded to the SLP strategy. So there are connectors and there are crossovers. Anything to do with holding the PCC to account is done through the Police and Crime Committee. I think I've got the word of that right. So that's done separately. So, you know, he himself, or the PCC's office himself, has his own legal responsibilities to discharge. He is not seen as a statutory member of a community safety partnership, because that's the duty that is distilled to local authorities and fire who are outside of policing. So policing is seen as a requirement to deal with crime and disorder, but the duty is those that necessarily aren't to give them the duty to do so. So whilst they are separate strategies, they are all interlinked and have to have due regard for each other. And the SLP is an overarching one in terms of where is the threats, where is the risks, where do we need to come together as a partnership as opposed to doing things in silo. Because we can't do everything all together on everything. So police will deal with policing where we need to come together and solve the high risk, high harm, high issues. That's what we're proposing to do in terms of this activity.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for a well-written report. It was an awful lot of information, but so well written and easy to read. I have just 2 points. The reoffending rates, you said they're rising, and there are more than 1 in 4 offenders committed reoffending, but you only give 26%, but you don't break that down. Are they reoffending because they've been in prison, or are they reoffending because they've just been charged and then let out again? It would just be interesting if that was broken down to a percentage of, and also the suicide rate in Lincolnshire. It seems to be a very small statement, and yet it's the highest, second highest among local authorities in England and Wales, and which seems really sad. But again, it's not been broken down with percentage of what the suicide rate is in age perspective. Thank you.
Firstly, thanks for the compliment around the document. I can take no credit for that. It's actually the staff that do that. But yeah, just in relation, so when we bring back some of the activity that we're doing around these elements, because this is high level, if we wanted to go into all of the detail of all of those things, it would be an extremely large report. Lincolnshire does have its own suicide strategy and suicide elements, so we don't go into too much depth within here because it's governed by somewhere else. We just know that it has an impact and does have an impact, certainly in terms of some of the domestic abuse suicide cases that we've seen. You know, that gets, again, that will come as part of the SLP reporting that we'll see through both the Safe Lincolnshire Partnership and the Domestic Abuse Partnership. So we'll be able to give some additional detail into that where we can. But when we do bring back specific activity that we're doing against those elements where we are targeting people who are reoffending, we can provide that detailed breakdown of what the, you know, who, when, how, were they in prison, were they community sentenced, what is that reoffending element? Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Martin and Jade, as well, for that comprehensive strategy. Although I don't know if I'm just thanking Jade now after what you said, Martin. I just have 3 questions. Chairman, obviously the first one is around how is the SLP going to ensure its project-based approach delivers long-term impact, particularly in high localities like Skegness and Gainsborough, rather than short-term outcomes, is one of my questions. The second one, I'm happy to do them all in one go, is what assurances can be given around performance monitoring and data-led insights, and how that will lead to timely action, especially when early warning signs of emerging threats are identified. And then I think Councillor Clark picked up on a point as well earlier about how is the SLP going to effectively work in collaboration with parallel governance bodies, such as, the LSCP, LSAB, the Domestic Abuse Partnership, to avoid duplication and ensure that we are delivering on, cross-body issues.
Thanks for the three questions. So I'll take them in order if I can. So the long-term impact is a really, really good question. And we've continually kind of challenged central government, because what we tend to find is that we get given short-term funding to enable us to do some of the activity that we do. What we've done over the last sort of 3 or 4 months is really try to engage with the voluntary sector in terms of, where are the voluntary sector's footprint, that once we do an intensive piece, then actually we can utilise the community resilience and the voluntary sector to kind of continue that activity and support. So it's a new way of working for us as a Safer Lincolnshire partnership. We perhaps haven't, previous to this year, brought the voluntary sector and the community resilience into the partnership, which we've done more of this year. And we've actually provided funding through the serious violence funding to voluntary groups to enable the community to do the work to help us reduce crime and disorder. So we'll be doing an assessment of those activities to make sure to see if that way of working is going to encourage that long-term sustainability. Now, do take the point, again, they are being funded, but ultimately, if we can bring what we get in funding and what the voluntary sector can also apply for in funding, hopefully that will create some sustainability in what it is that we're trying to do, because it's not just about us coming in and doing an intensive piece of work. We need to build up the community resilience in order to be long and sustaining. You talked about then next the kind of how do we ensure the data insights, and we're kind of fleet of foot in terms of making sure we're kind of agile in information monitoring, but also the kind of monitoring the success of each of the projects. So I'm trying to get the right page for you. So on page 37, it kind of outlines the structure for that. And if you kind of, it's the SLP structure. And in there's the community data scanning and insight board. So that board will be utilised to kind of check in about what's the data still telling us around the projects that we're doing. Is there any new data or intelligence that we need to be aware of that is at risk that we need to then respond to and be more agile in terms of what we're doing? So that the community safety data team will look at building up what is our current baseline of activity. For example, we're doing a project in Skegness. What's the current kind of offending? Who is it offending? Where are they offending? What's the impact? Baseline that, do the activity, engage with the community resilience, and then measure the outcomes and outputs. But that will be done through a board process. But the intelligence team are continually scanning the activity that's taking place. So we've got a team within the community safety element that does that, which is paid for by all of the partners. So whilst LCC host it, it's paid for by all of the partners. And I didn't write the third question down. Jade's got that.
Thank you. And yeah, with the third question, in terms of making sure that obviously we're not duplicating across partnerships, we have a joint delivery plan across the key partnerships, the Children's Partnership, the Adults Board, the Domestic Abuse Partnership, and then the SLP. So we work really closely as business managers to make sure that we know where that area is going to be placed. There's no duplication, but where we do then need to work together, we're doing that as well with those cross-cutting themes. So that's really key to the work that we do.
And just to provide some kind of assurance on that, so Adults Board got a priority around kind of dementia, safeguarding the exploitation of people with dementia, correlation with dementia and domestic abuse. So they've kind of asked the Domestic Abuse Partnership to look at what's the effect of dementia and domestic abuse and lead on a domestic abuse project. So they don't do that. So we're doing that on behalf of adults within the LDAP for that. And in a similar way in terms of sexual harm to children, we've seen in our data around where the sexual harm data is coming in around effect on children, and we've, as an SLP, have said Children's Board, you need to focus on that. You're the one that's with the contact with the schools. You've got the duties around the children. So we're not doing that activity. We've asked that board to do it, and that's how we govern it. So, yeah, we've got really strong ties across the board with a joint plan.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Bamford.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the report. It's very comprehensive and detailed. Just 2 questions from me, if I may. Just picking up on that last point about the cross-sharing of information between the different partnerships. It may have been answered partially. I just need to be clear on how is that information actually and that data shared across the partnerships, so individuals don't fall through the cracks between one agency and another. Is that a database of some description, or is that formal committees coming together on a periodic basis? So just how that information shared is my first question. And the second one, in light of the report yesterday from Baroness Casey, is that something that, I appreciate the report's very new, but is that something that has been an issue in Lincolnshire previously? And if not, you know, where's that data coming from? And if so, what have we been doing about that in the run-up to this report? So, 2 questions, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we have the analysts have a collective analytical group. So there's a children's data person as well as there's community safety person. We as the community safety team kind of look after adults, domestic abuse and the SLP. So we're kind of sharing our own data with our own boards because we administrate those 3 boards as the community safety team. So the data that's known and shared with that. We have access to policing systems, to district systems, and we also have a joint database where it's a multi-agency case management system, which we put the likes of kind of fraud prevention and social behaviour activities and domestic abuse activities as the main 3 that we kind of case manage as a collective group, which all partners then have access to that data. So we've got real life, true data that's being put into, so we're sharing in kind of real time. The children's have their own kind of analytical capacity and they work very closely with our analytical capacity and share the data between each other. Again, they've got access to the policing data, children's data, so it's they have their formal get-togethers and then that's kind of fed through to a monthly business managers meeting. So on a monthly basis, the 4 business managers who oversee the 4 boards then collectively get together with the groups and what's the plans, what's the projects, what's the data. So that's all kind of, that's how it's shared. In relation to the Casey report, so no, Lincolnshire has not seen sexual offending, grooming, profiling as described in the Casey report. I'm not sure you're here, but I was a Lincolnshire police officer for 30 years before moving into the council, and at one stage was head of our public protection teams. Now, whilst we have had grooming investigations, not as described in the Casey report in Lincolnshire's history. That's not to say that we might not need to go back and reassess some of those elements, which I'm sure Lincolnshire Police will be doing.
Thank you. Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you very much for that report. It was very good. On page 36 of the agenda pack, it mentions that during 2025 to 2028, the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership will move into a project-based approach to meet its statutory duties. Could you explain to the committee how a partnership is funded and what its budget is, and how the projects will be prioritised if there are competing demands on the budget?
So I think it's probably worth just, because I think we've probably got time, just giving some history on why we've moved to a project-based element from what we previously did in the previous strategy. So in the previous strategy, we worked in a, silos the wrong word, but we kind of pillared our statutory responsibility. So we've got a duty to reduce crime, we've got a duty to reduce antisocial behaviour, we've got a duty to reduce substance misuse, we've got a duty to reduce serious violence, and we've got a duty to, there's a fifth one, it's always a test, crime and social behaviour, drug and alcohol, substance misuse and serious violence. 5. So we kind of pillared our activity along those 5 items. When we did the needs analysis, what we were finding is actually the world is completely blurred in terms of those lines. So those that were involved in serious violence were also involved in drug and alcohol. We're also involved in antisocial behaviour. We're also kind of showing up in adult social care records, and we're also showing up in children's social care records. So the kind of the strategy in trying to deal with reducing reoffending or antisocial behaviour kind of became really blurred. So we moved to a methodology where we'd say, okay, so who is it that might be causing us the problems, and why are they causing us the problems? And let's problem solve that, so around a person. Where might the locality be causing us a problem? And let's deal with the locality as well as the people that's causing us the problems. So those projects are described. So whilst they say projects, it's really about understanding who are the people that are causing us the most harm, where, and what are they doing. And we can sometimes do that on a county basis. Sometimes there's a consolidated area. You'll see in the report that it talked about Sleaford, for example, in being one of the places where the crime rate in Sleaford had been one of the areas that had grown post the pandemic. So pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, Sleaford in our area, really safe county, part of the county. Not huge in crime numbers, but ultimately it had seen risen. So we did some locality-based activity there over the last 6 to 8 weeks to have an impact on that element. So those are the things. That's where we've kind of moved from a siloed approach to a more targeted, based on our evidence, rather than trying to singularly deliver to our statutory duties. Actually, we're impacting on all of our statutory duties because the mixture of what we're seeing is so cross-cutting. Funding. So as an SLP, we get funding from the PCC. We get funding from the local authority. We get funding from the district councils, and we get funding from health. That's to pay for the convening of the partnership SLP, to pay for the analytical work, to pay for the case management systems, also pays for our statutory duty to do domestic abuse related death reviews. So we have to do those as well, and that pays for that as well. What it doesn't pay for is activity on the ground. So we have to use business as usual resources to impact on what's happening on the ground. So LCC don't necessarily have a doing arm within the community safety element. So we have to rely on districts, police, probation, fire, who do have a footprint in this, and saying, we all can contribute to that element of it. We get a specific grant funding for specific things. So community safety, so the serious violence duty came with a funding pot. For Lincolnshire, that equated to this year to about £380,000. So we go through an assessment process on looking at what does the evidence say, where our need is. We then kind of put out to all of the partners to kind of come up with initiatives or activities that would help reduce serious violence in whatever the profile was telling us. Also put that out for the voluntary sector. We then collectively come together as a senior group to then prioritise those bids, the outcomes, the impact, and kind of go through an assessment process to say, right, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and effectively award those people bidding that money, to make sure we've got then really tight controls to say, you said you were going to do this, we gave you this amount of money, we expect this outcome, and make sure it's then reported on. And it's those types of reports that we'll be able to bring into this scrutiny committee. So you can see, certainly in serious violence, where we have got that dedicated funding, this is the funding we got, this is what we did with it, and this is the outcomes that have been achieved. The difficulty always with community safety elements, so we also can bid into national government Safer Streets funding. Districts can bid into other funding. The PCC gets specific funding for community safety activity that they can bid into. The problem that we've always had is that it's one-off, year-on-year funding. So it comes back to the sustainability problem, is that we continually kind of canvass government to say, we should be getting funding on a longer basis. So in terms of our domestic abuse profile, under the Domestic Abuse Act, we do get funding of £1.8 million per year to discharge our domestic abuse functions as a county council. So we have to, that funding now, rather than being grant funding, has come into Lincolnshire County Council's baseline funding to give assurance that we're getting that, at least that each year, every year, so we can plan appropriately that we're getting it. So when we're commissioning services, we're not worried about, oh, commissioning ends this year, are we actually going to get part of that funding next year to be able to pay for a new commissioning service? So it's very much having to balance national funding, short-term funding elements. Again, we've got a funding stream coming this year around a domestic abuse perpetrator initiative, but we have to spend the money by 31st of March 2026. Well, it would probably take us till December 2026 to set up what it is they want us to set up, and they expect us then to spend the money. So we're always challenged. So we've challenged back on that, and we're waiting for a decision in July about whether they'll extend that over a 2-year period so we can actually actively instigate the programs of work that we want to do. So funding is challenging. So it's a mix of business as usual resource with specific one-off funding that we get either from local government, from LCC, from PCC or from districts to kind of combat what it is that we need to do to discharge our duties.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Most of my questions have been asked, actually. Some good questioning going on. Could I just echo two, please, from Councillor Smith? I'd like to support the good things that have been said about this paper. It's very well written, but it's not just that. It's very well designed. It's very accessible, and I've never seen red and grey used in a paper like this, and actually it draws you into the paper, and I would urge you to do that again. It really does contribute to the ease of reading, so thank you. Also, could I support the request for more data? I was particularly keen to find out why there's such prolific reoffending here. I'm keen to know why the offending is highest in West Lindsey, where my division is, and the suicide figures as well, the demographic. Some information on that would be useful, please. But my questions are just a clarification on page 35. There's a paragraph that talks about public confidence in a range of public services. It's deteriorating while tax rates increase, raising increasing legitimacy concerns. What is the legitimacy referring to? I wasn't quite clear. It's my reading of it. It won't be your writing of it. So is it to do with the confidence in public services, or is it the legitimacy of the lack of confidence? Yeah, and then I have just one more question, Chairman.
Yeah, so it's the confidence in public services. So are we trusted as public services?
Thank you ever so much. And with your project work, now that you're moving to project work, is there any capacity to move outside the projects if provision or needs, extra provision, gaps or needs are identified? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really why we've gone for that more project-based approach, because then it can be more time limited, it can be more focused, and we can leave a legacy, hopefully, like I say, within the community and more sustainability. The idea is that we work in an area, we upskill people within the area if they need that. We support them to take that project forward even further, and then we can move on to something that's, the data may be telling us we need to go somewhere else and we need to support somewhere else. So it's about being more agile and being able to be more targeted in places that need it as we see things emerge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. Echoing what Councillor Brockway has just said, the document reads very well. It's very well constructed, and it was actually a real pleasure to read. I worked very closely with the North Lincoln Shop Watch Committee, which was started by our PCSO a while back, and it's becoming more of a multi-agency thing, but really with the reoffending issue in the north of Lincoln, especially as Lincoln Big has got much better at dealing with shop theft in the city centre, it's essentially migrated it up to the north of the city where there's a huge shopping complex, and we've been working together with the local stores. It's a very complex problem, and quite often I see that actually you get different departments of governments that just don't seem to be working together, and a good example of that would be that the justice system seems to say that shop theft isn't really a problem that warrants prison, which I would agree with. I think most of these people have got severe mental health needs, they've got very complex lives, but of course that doesn't seem to have been communicated effectively over to the police, who are still having to get 6 arrests for shop theft before they can put them back into that system, and these things revolve, and in the meantime the businesses up there are really struggling, so it's really reassuring to see that this work's taking place. I think the other thing that I really liked about the document was the acceptance that getting the community element and the community engagement was a weakness. This is again something that I see time and time again across the whole of society generally, and certainly since lockdown I think a lot of volunteers sort of stepped away or moved away or didn't re-engage again, and I'd be really interested to know how you're going to tackle that issue, for personal reasons, because it's something, if there's investment going into getting that community engagement and things are being successful, it'd be really useful for that to be shared with other sectors and other areas as well. But that was one thing that I really liked. I really value when people sort of say, actually, this is something that isn't quite working how we want it to, but I'd be really keen to sort of learn more about what the plan is to get that community engagement up.
Yeah, thanks for the observations again around the paper, and certainly recognising that shop theft is a complex area in terms of trying to tackle that and reduce that. It says in the paper that shop theft is one of the very few areas of crime in the county that has actually risen since the pandemic. It's great that we're seeing fewer house burglaries. It's great that we're seeing fewer cars stolen and broken into, but ultimately it's the people that would have been committing those offences are doing shoplifting because they know they're not likely to go to prison, and we've got to work out how do we get an effective community-based solution working for those individuals that doesn't impact then on the community. In terms of the engagement, again, it kind of talks to why we are being kind of place-based or people targeted, because then actually we can identify which communities we can get into, to get the support that we need around those types of areas. It's very, very hard to get a universal engagement strategy that actively changes things. We can have an engagement strategy in terms of our crime and disorder across the county about what we're trying to do and the messages that we want to get out, but will that actively get people engaged in trying to reduce crime and antisocial and take some kind of resilient responsibility around their areas? It won't. So we have to make sure that the project methodology or the targeted methodology is also about who do we need to target to engage with us to solve the problem. We certainly recognise prior to this year that our footprint with the voluntary sector was really poor, and actually we missed opportunities on previous funding streams where we didn't get the voluntary sector involved. And when I had a meeting with them earlier this year in January, and they talked me through about all the stuff that they were actively involved in, engaged with and doing, it was like, well, you are actually delivering what we want to deliver, therefore we'll lean into you, and then you can lean into the communities because you've got a better footprint, probably more trusted than local authorities or policing, and your reputation. So that's what we're doing. So it's about targeted engagement around the problem we're trying to solve, utilising the voluntary sector as the bridgeway to that.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Just following on from the data and engagement, has the partnership considered for example, an app for just reporting issues in the area from residents? For example, Country Eye is an app in Kent that we're able to report suspicious behaviour and they receive updates regarding it just to make people feel safer in their communities, whether that's been whether that's been thought of. Obviously, the success of Fix My Street in Lincolnshire has been an example of where, you know, that sort of using an app has been successful, and that can obviously be used by the police to see where crimes need to be. So where at peak times, where incidents have been reported, and can reduce reports in suburban and rural areas. Also, I just wanted a bit more data on the. So we're pretty good in our area for general crime compared to the rest of the country. I just wondered if there was any data regarding sort of urban and rural sort of those disconnected, just to make sure that we're seeing where we're falling, you know, we're succeeding and where we're falling behind maybe potentially, just to see, you know, where we can improve in this partnership and understand a bit more where our focus needs to be. Thank you.
Yeah, again, thanks for the question. So we've done some specific targeting around safe streets, so very much towards the violence against women and girls agenda and the kind of safe streets. So we created a reporting app for that, so where people say, well, I'm really scared to walk down this passageway, or I got attacked here, or I'm not comfortable being in that park. So that's been really, really helpful. We also utilise our preventative education, so they fill out a kind of an app-based questionnaire following that about what they're fearful of. So we try to get the adult view and the children's view as well in terms of the stuff. It's a really good point around the more general element of app-based risk assessment, something we can take back. So we've done it for specific things in terms of getting the public's views and really promoting that, but not necessarily probably as wide as what you've described. A lot of the information I know that, and again, it's trying not to duplicate something and have a single source. So, you know, policing use quite a few reporting methods app-wise to kind of engage with communities and get people, you know, there's Farming Watch, Shop Watch, you know, so there is already a kind of a watch-based element. I'm not sure of the intricacies of whether that's developed and modernised into an app, or is it still a kind of a text-based type situation. But I think we've definitely used it, and it's definitely been a success because we've seen some real benefits around the violence against women and girls, identification of areas of concern and worry that have been rectified through some funding. So I think it's something that we can take back and have a look at. Yeah. And in terms of the data, so yeah, we can bring back. So with Strike Strange, so Lincolnshire Police will have comparative forces, and the county council will have comparator local authorities. So we might just have to do a little bit of mix. They're not likely to be the same in terms of how they operate, but we can certainly look to see where we sit in terms of the comparator and feed that in to the reports.
Okay, thank you very much everyone for the questions and comments. This will conclude the discussion of this item. I propose that the committee endorses the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership Strategy for 2025 to 2028 to reduce crime, disorder and antisocial behaviour in the county of Lincolnshire. And the committee will receive a follow-up report in 12 months' time on the progress made during the first year of the strategy. Can I please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you, that is agreed. We will now revert to sitting as the Community Safety Scrutiny Committee for the remainder of the meeting and move on to item 6. So item 6 is the Community Safety Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item is on pages 43 to 52 of the agenda pack and sets out the committee's planned work programme for 2025 and 26. The actions required by this committee are to review and agree the committee's work programme as set out in this report, highlight for discussion any additional scrutiny activity which could be considered for inclusion in the work programme. The report will be presented by Tracy Johnson, Senior Scrutiny Officer. Over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. The draft work programme for the Community Safety Scrutiny Committee sets out a forward plan of activity for the 25-26 council year. It includes a balance of policy review and development and performance monitoring, and will include items for pre-decision scrutiny as and when appropriate. The items currently programmed for the next meeting on the 22nd of July are, firstly, His Majesty's Senior Coroner Annual Report, which will include an update on the Greater Lincolnshire Coronial Service merger, and this will be from Paul Smith, His Majesty's Senior Coroner for Greater Lincolnshire, which Martin referred to earlier. The second item is the Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Statement of Assurance for 24-25. This is the Fire and Rescue Annual Statement of Assurance on Financial, Governance and Operational Matters. It will be presented by Mark Baxter, Chief Fire Officer, and Ryan Stacey, Assistant Chief Fire Officer. And currently the last item on the agenda is the Trading Standards, Food Safety and Meteorology activity for 2024-25. And this will provide an annual overview on these trading standard activities and will be presented by Mark Keel, Head of Trading Standards. Members are encouraged to suggest activities, areas for scrutiny based on emerging priorities and public interest. And these suggestions will be noted and discussed further with the Chairman and Vice Chairman and officers after the meeting to identify the best method to consider those suggestions. This may be via a briefing paper if it's just an information only type item, or it could be an item on a future agenda. And just following up from the request on the last item, I'll pick up with the officers in terms of the data that's requested around reoffending, suicide figures and the urban and rural crime, about the best way of handling those, whether it's in future reports or an email with that data in. And also following the workshop earlier, I'll also pick up with Andrew and Nicole and Lauren about an informal briefing session on the migration topic. And that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Tracy. Right. I'd like to now invite comments on the work programme. Councillor Carey, any speakers? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Waddington Training Facility coming on the 31st of March. I know it's quite a way away, but will we have a visit to the facility scheduled before it comes to scrutiny? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith. It's something we could look into. I know that it's been planned to do a visit, hasn't it? So we could certainly look at doing one either just before the item, or we could consider the item and then have a tour around afterwards. But something I can pick up with Mark in terms of the best way to handle that.
If that's everything, thank you for the questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion on this item. I propose that we approve the planned work programme for 2025 and 26, subject obviously to everything that we've just raised. Can you please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you, that is agreed. This now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance.